We are live here. Welcome, everyone. Donna, how are you this evening?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Awesome. I'm doing all right.
I am excited about tonight.
Yeah. Everyone's getting in here. We have a lot of questions. So I tried to prepare Donna for them, but might still be a curveball or two in there. We'll see. Any rewards tonight if you get stumped by a question, Donna?
Oh, no. Like, what were you thinking?
Maybe
that's going to make, we can't do that, Matthew, because that'll encourage everybody to make really hard questions.
All right. Well, just so everyone knows, since we have so many questions, we'll do our best. We'll get to them all, but if some questions come up in the chat and we can't get to them, we'll try to answer them by email afterwards, or if they're
another Q&A. We could do
or we'll do another one.
I don't know if we get it in before Christmas though, but I'm excited because so many people had questions.
Adam and Aaron, hello, welcome. So we do have the chat feature enabled, and I also have the Q&A. Like I said, we're going to be getting to the emailed questions first, but if you have something, post it up in the Q&A or in the chat.
Okay, well,
you might as well get started. We got a lot of people in here already, and we're right on 7, just after 7. So so what do you say we just jump into it?
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so I've segmented a bunch of these questions into some topics loosely. So let's start with some getting started questions, Don.
Okay, let me just say hello to everybody. And I want to thank you for getting on the Q&A. And I am very excited. I'm being very serious. I just glanced at some of these questions. I believe these are the best questions that we've ever had at a Q&A. I love that you guys are really interested. You're asking intriguing questions, and I'm just real excited. I think this is going to be a great Q&A. So I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. Matthew, you want to read them off to me one at a time, please?
So our first question is from Adam. What's the single most important thing a newbie can do to take action with note buying? And what's the first thing a newbie should do?
Marketing and marketing. I mean, if you don't market for notes, you're not going to have anything. And let me back up on the first thing. You need to have a phone. Depending on what your marketing is, like if you decide you're going to do direct mail, then you need to buy a list and decide, are you going to do your mailing yourself, or are you going to go to like Postcard Mania or something like that and get your marketing set up? But there's, you could do Craigslist, which requires nothing. I mean, you could go on Craigslist tonight with no advanced preparation other than have your submission form ready and see what you can find right away. But marketing, without a doubt, is the most important thing for a note buyer to do.
Great. All right, we're just going to roll through these. Alan has the next question. He says, I've learned the evaluation calculations, but I'm not sure where to go next. Is there a quick start outline in the materials?
Actually, the stimulus program is a quick start that was designed specifically for that purpose. And I know it's 8 hours, but it is everything that you need to get started, including the role plays and everything. And the reason that I put that together was because I was getting flooded once they did the quarantine. I was getting flooded with calls and people who had turned down their quotes back in the fall. And then all of a sudden they're going, hey, can you still buy my note? I need to sell now. And so I realized that time was of the essence. And so I did that 8-hour training specifically with that in mind. So the first thing I would do is listen to the stimulus program, the 8-hour training. The next important thing I would say would be the 2019 media set. And the reason I send you there is the media set expounds on the master guide, and it is the most current thing. It's the second most current thing. The most current thing is the stimulus plan. Well, we do have the academy also, but as far as being ready today, start with the stimulus plan and then go to the media set. What I like about the media set is that you can look in the table of contents and you can decide what you want to work on. So if you're looking for basic ideas, maybe you've already got some cash and you're trying to decide how you're going to use it, then going through the 2019 media set would be a good idea for you. If you need to do the evaluations, there's a chapter on that, a chapter on using the easiest or of using the 4 infallible steps. If you decide you want to use a trust, there's a chapter on trust. There's a chapter explaining the difference between licensing and brokering. So my point is that the media set is so comprehensive and it's well organized with that table of contents that instead of having to watch or listen to it start to finish, you really could zero in on exactly what you're looking for. So I would start with a stimulus program, and then I would move on to the media set. And then if you still have questions after that, then I would go to the master guide. Okay. But I tried to make the media set, I tried to encompass everything in the master guide into the media set and expound on it with stories and examples.
Great. I wanted to mention also chapter 6 in the master guide has the getting started overview or whatever. Is that still helpful? Or you still recommend that?
That is absolutely still good. But again, because of this particular market, you're not going to beat what I did for the stimulus program. That is absolutely the most current thing on getting started and using the easiest 1, 2, 3 coaching. I mean, we did role plays and everything. So I think, I mean, that's where I would go if I were you. That's why I put it together.
Yeah, stimulus plan is great. Okay, so since you mentioned marketing, let's jump into some lead questions. Muziel and Klaus had the same question. Where do I find quality, affordable leads for performing and non-performing notes? Is this information available in your training?
Okay, the information is available in the training. The big thing that you need to realize is that you use different sources depending on whether you're doing performing or non-performing. For the performing notes, I hate to say it, but go back to the stimulus training because I go through the marketing in detail for performing notes in that stimulus training. So basically, if you have the funds to do it, most people like to start with direct mail. I go through that very thoroughly, whether you want to use a postcard or you want to use a letter. If you would like to try to do something less expensive, then I would move on to social media. I would do LinkedIn. I would set up a page on LinkedIn expressing that you are a note buyer, you're looking for performing or non-performing notes, whatever you're going to focus on. I would recommend that you look online and take an online course on how to build a business on LinkedIn. And they'll go through the whole thing about how you connect with people and then you send out emails every week. And the idea is that you send out things that will help people. You're not just, you don't want it to always be, hey, do you have any notes that you want to sell? You need to give something to them, and then they will reciprocate if you let them know what you're looking for. But there is a very specific way of doing that. I took the course probably 10 or 15 years ago, and it was just somebody that was referred to me. They weren't in the note business or anything. I highly recommend that for LinkedIn. For Craigslist, I would recommend that you set aside a couple hours, maybe like 3 times a week, go to whatever cities you want to market to in the country, and you just start searching. Think about if you were going to you had a note that you wanted to sell, what keywords would be in your ad? Like sell, seller carryback note, sell note and deed of trust, sell note and mortgage, buy my note. And once you start searching for that, you're going to see people's ads, and you can even glean words off of their ads so you know what to put in and search for. You can also place an ad on Craigslist. I think, Matthew, do you know, is that $20 or $5 or something that they charge?
I'm not sure. I think
it's a very nominal amount.
Oh, you're talking about the ad. I'm not sure how much the ads cost right now.
You could definitely do that. So that would be another inexpensive way of doing it. But social media is great. I absolutely recommend that you join your local RIA group. I would not be here today if it were not for the Cincinnati RIA group. There are other people in the group that will carry back notes. They want to cash out so they can go buy another rental property. And it's a perfect place to network. If they have the haves and wants where you can get up, or even online, what they're doing now, and you post things that you're looking for and post things that you have for sale. I absolutely would be involved with that. And when you post a note that you have available, the thing is, you're only looking for one buyer, but 10 people could see that. And now 10 people know that you have notes available. So to put a note on one of those platforms, it's great marketing for you. Over time, networking will be your best source. And I mean, it would cost you to join the RIA in that, but you're getting a lot of other ancillary benefits with that as well. But networking over time will definitely be your best source.
Okay, great. That answers, Pearl had a question, what are some ways to market for notes that are more affordable than direct mail? So that definitely answers that. Do you have anything else to add to that question, Donna?
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about was non-performing on the last one.
Oh.
So on non-performing notes, I would definitely use LinkedIn. I would start connecting with banks and fund managers, people that have pools of notes. What happens is the larger funds will buy a pool from a bank, then they split it up and resell it to smaller asset management companies who sell it maybe to some mom and pop companies. And it goes on down the food chain until it gets to the place where they will allow you to cherry pick or buy one at a time. But you need to start connecting with those people. I think that LinkedIn is the best way to make contact with asset managers and fund managers. That being said, I absolutely think that the best way to find the non-performing notes, you're not going to like it, but it's the best way, is to smile and dial. My friend, I have a very good friend. I do have more than one friend, but I said my friend. She does a lot of non-performing, and all she does is she gets a list of lenders in whatever state she's looking for, and she calls them up. She and she just simply says, do you have any non-performing notes that you want to get rid of? And I know a lot of people that use that method. Some people find that hard to do, but she goes straight to the top, and that's how she gets her deals. So that's, if I wanted to focus on non-performing, that is what I would do. Now, I also do get a lot of people who just send me, they call them tapes, they're Excel spreadsheets basically, and I get those routinely. So what I do is when I get them, I'll look and see if they have anything in Cincinnati that I might be interested in. And if so, I might make an offer on what I see. I haven't done that recently, but in the last downturn, I did that. And it's a great way. You can buy the note and then you can negotiate. I did this with one of my properties. You can negotiate and get a deed in lieu or go ahead and foreclose. In my case, we started foreclosing, and as soon as we did, then the borrowers responded to me and we were able to get the deed without foreclosing. And I think as far as, I think it was Pearl that asked any more economical ways. I think I answered that with social media, Craigslist and LinkedIn, I think would, or even networking at your local RIA.
Great. Alan did have a helpful question about with LinkedIn, if he already has an account or a profile with his main job, should you get another one? I just want to jump in and answer that keep your main profile, just add on that you're an investor and use your professional background to give expert answers in forums so people click on your profile and see what you do. That's one of the natural ways to use that. All right, so next question, Demetrius. I'm a realtor with access to MLS. Can I use short sale data as a source for note leads?
I have never heard of that before. It's a good thing I didn't offer a prize. So you're saying that you have properties that are listed that can be bought as short sales. So what you could do is, when I first started, and this was way before banks commonly sold their notes, their non-performing notes to investors. This was like probably 2001, right about that time. And that's when I came out with my book, Note Buying, The Ultimate Short Sale. And so what I was doing was I was advertising for short sales, and I would get my foot in the door. And as soon as I connected with the loss mitigation officer, I would then say, hey, wouldn't it be a lot easier if I just bought this note? And a lot of times they'd go along with it. Sometimes they'd say, oh, we don't do that. Sometimes they'd say, oh, no, we don't do that. But then the next time I talked to them, they'd say, hey, I heard Dave down the hall says we can do this. So I used that at that point. I used short sales as my means to buying a defaulted note. But then if the bank said no, they wouldn't sell the defaulted note, I simply went ahead and finished the short sale. Well, I quit doing that because the laws were changing and the banks were changing their protocol. Like every week, you think you had, back then countrywide, you'd know exactly what the package was needed, what they required for a package. And every week they'd change it. And it just really ticked me off. I was so frustrated because I'm very detailed and a perfectionist and I want to have it exactly right. But it was like, there were so many moving parts to it. And I just got totally frustrated with it. So my response would be, if you are a realtor and you know how to do short sales, by all means, I would use the MLS to get note leads. And I would do exactly what I just said. I would call the bank as though you're doing a short sale, say, hey, I buy notes. Why don't you just sell me the note instead? And if they say no, then I would go ahead and complete the short sale. Another way that you can do that is that if they won't sell you the note, you could pass that lead off to a realtor or another person who does short sales, who is familiar with what the banks are doing and who is set up to handle the short sales, and have them pay you like $1,000 finder fee if they close the deal, so that you haven't totally wasted that lead.
Excellent. Can you see a way that it could be used for expired listings as leads?
Expired listings are a great place to get leads from.
Because that was a follow-up from Dave. Good question.
Okay. So, excuse me one second. The expired listings, these are people who have tried to sell their house. They're frustrated because in their 6 month or whatever period of time they had it on, they couldn't sell. If you contact those people and say, hey, have you sold your house yet? No. Have you ever thought about offering seller financing? Oh, we don't want to do that because we need the cash right now. Well, what if I could show you how, if you were to carry back a note within 6 months or so, you could get cashed out? Would you be of interest to that? And you tell them, and now you have to be careful about this, because if you are not a licensed realtor, you cannot help them sell their house. But as a note buyer, you could show them how to set up a sale so that you will buy their note. It's a different way of approaching them. That, hey, I buy notes, I buy seller carrybacks, and I'd be happy to show you the type of note that I would be looking for. And if you were able to sell the house, on this basis, so much of a down payment, decent credit, and then you season it, that means collect payments, let's say for 6 months, then I might be able to buy that note from you and you would cash out at that point. So that expired listings is a great way to do it. You just have to have some finesse with it and make sure that you're not committing, calling yourself a realtor, or that you're helping them to sell the house. You're simply showing them how to create a note that you could buy later. And I think that's a great way. I think it's a great source of notes. You have to be prepared, though, to sit back and wait while they season it. Okay.
All right. JB has a question. What states are currently experiencing the least job losses or are the best right now for performing notes? Which states or areas should I avoid? My objective is building a monthly cash flow.
Good question. Actually, I can't answer as far as what the least job losses are, but that would be an excellent thing to Google and try to find out. What I use for my determination is based on the last downturn, which states were the slowest to recover, because everybody's going through a downturn right now, every state. But the question is, which ones pop back? And so in the stimulus training, you'll see that I list about 7 states that I would not currently buy in. And that's not to say that you should not buy in them. There's various reasons. Like for years, I've not bought in New York or Maryland. And I don't buy there because of their laws. And I don't care to study their laws and figure it out and comply with them. However, if you're going to be doing a lot of marketing in New York, you get a New York attorney who can make sure you comply with their laws, same with Maryland, and you could be good to go there. Okay. But for me and for a lot of other note buyers, people are hesitant to do notes in Maryland, in New York, in New Jersey, Illinois. I usually come from the West Coast. I'm going backwards now. Washington, the state of Washington, Oregon, California, and Nevada. And the other thing is, keep in mind where all the trouble was. I've got a note that I'm holding that's 12 miles from Portland. Made me a little nervous when I saw all the fires in Portland. Thankfully, they're still paying and everything is fine. I looked at another note in Washington, the state of Washington. It was something like, I don't remember exactly, but like 25 miles away from all the fires. And the value of the land was in timber. And I'm going, you know what? A year ago, I would have bought that note in a heartbeat, but not today. So make sure that you're buying. You don't want to buy in an area where they're rioting and tearing everything down. You need to stay away from that. I would not buy in California. I did just buy a note in California over the past year. I would not buy in California again. Simply, they're like Illinois. They've gone so far left. They are anti-capitalist. They are anti-note buyers. And I just don't want to have anything to do with them. So, and I apologize if I offended anybody. It's just a fact.
All right, let's see here. All right, so Robin and Aaron ask, in Donna's professional opinion, are November and December slow times for note buying?
That's a very interesting question, because actually December is very busy. It's busy with people who are wanting to close before the end of the year. And the thing is, it's very difficult to get anything closed in the last 2 weeks of the month. So like right now, if I don't have a note already under contract and I haven't already ordered the title and the appraisal, it's not going to close by the end of the year, even though in another month I might have been able to do that. But here's the thing. That being said, even though, well, November is a fine month. I wouldn't hesitate to do November. This November was bad because of the election. Okay, because we hardly had anything until last week. And all of a sudden I started getting lots of notes wanting quotes. Okay, so do not be upset if you did not get responses in the month of November. People they're all wound up with what's going on, and it's scary, and they don't know what to do. And now some of them are still contacting us because they need cash, and we can give them cash. But I definitely saw this November as being less busy than most. That being said, now it's all gangbusters again. I can't keep up with everything. I mean, I can, but I'm having to get other people to help me with it. What I was going to say was, at this point in time, I would not send out any more postcards or letters. If you just recently did it, don't worry about it. The thing that if people call you back, don't promise the 30-day turnaround. I would definitely do 45 days. I would explain that not much happens the last 2 weeks of the month. Okay. But if I was just now getting started, what I would do is I would get my mailings all ready to go, and I would plan on mailing those out on maybe New Year's Day or that weekend, so that people would get them maybe on Tuesday following New Year's Day. Marketing people will tell you that your letter or postcard is most likely to get read if they receive it on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. So, and after New Year's, people have got, you know, their New Year's, what's the word for it, Matthew? Resolutions, all set and they're ready to go. So you want to get it in there that first week after New Year's Day.
Great. All right. Aaron said, great, thank you. So she appreciates the answer. Okay, so next question comes from Kevin. I'm expecting callbacks for my first mailing. Would you give me an idea of how those first phone conversations should go?
You definitely should listen to the stimulus training again, okay? Because I think those, the role plays, we had several that I think will really be helpful to you. What you want to keep in mind is that you want to establish a rapport. That's your most important thing. Somebody said last night or over the weekend that they didn't have their submission form, so they did not take the call. You should never turn down a call. If you see a potential seller calling, you absolutely should answer the phone right then, because they could have a list that they're going down. And if you don't answer, they don't call you back. It would be way better for you to answer and say, oh, I'm so glad you called, and I really would like to help you with your note. I'm tied up right now. When can I call you back? Can I call you back in a half hour? Can I call you back tonight? And get that rapport going right off the bat. And you have to be there when they call. Don't think, okay, I'm just going to get this list and I'm going to call people back. You need to strike while the iron is hot. So if you don't have a submission form handy, just think through logically. The biggest question that I always have is, what's the loan to value? So you need to ask them the address of the property so you can look it up online. And then you want to ask them, what did it sell for? What do you think it's worth? What's the current balance that's owed? And I don't need a submission form to find that out. And then the next thing that I would do is I would think of my financial calculator. You want to know NIPV payment FV. So ask them, what was the original loan amount? PV. What was the interest rate? Did you fully amortize it, or was there a balloon? What's the monthly payment? Do you know the current balance? Just think of the terms that would be involved in writing the note. And then ask them about the borrower. Is the borrower working? Do they pay on time? So if you just look at it, just using common sense of what you would want to know, you really don't have to have the submission form. You might not get everything that I'd like to have, but I think you'd get enough. And even if you don't, now you've got the people on the hook. They've started giving you information. Once you get your submission form in hand, if you forgot something important that we can't figure out, you call them up and say, hey, I just need to ask you a couple more things. Okay. So just go with the flow and be friendly, develop a rapport with people. Remember that you have what they need. You can help them, and you just need to convey that to them.
Awesome. Okay, rolling on here. Let's see. Dave had a few questions here. So in a direct mail campaign, does having a local area code on the phone number matter, or on the return address?
I honestly don't think that it does. The reason being, everybody has cell phones and it doesn't matter whether it's long distance or not. Now, you might get somebody that thinks that they have to get somebody local, but I don't think that's a big enough deal. I will tell you that for a long time on my regular office phone, I had an 800 number. It hardly ever got used. It was on all of my marketing material. It used to be real important, and it used to be a major thing, but not anymore. So I would not worry about that. The return address, I don't think that matters whether it's local or not either. That's my personal opinion.
So do you have any updates to your COVID strategy since you did this stimulus plan?
No, that is absolutely, I would still do exactly what I told you to do there.
All right. And then Dave's last question there was, what are your thoughts on skip tracing and cold calling note holders?
That's not something that I recommend. And the reason is, unless if you have the ability to check the do not call list, then maybe you could do that. Skip tracing would be used more for non-performing notes. If you are buying a note, you need to find the note, the borrower, in order to negotiate to get the deed. Absolutely, I'd use a skip tracer then. But for performing notes, that's just a different ball game. I would not use a skip tracer at all for those.
All right, we're going to move on to some questions about evaluating notes, Donna.
Okay.
All right, so Vicki had a few questions here. What is the minimum payer credit score you're looking for?
There actually is not a minimum. Sometimes I never even pull the credit. If I know that people have bad credit, and as long as there's plenty of equity in the property, and if they have a solid pay history, the longer the better. And by that, I mean provable pay history, where I can see when their payments were deposited, or they have copies of canceled checks. Well, they wouldn't be canceled, but copies of checks. As long as they can prove that they've paid on time and there's plenty of equity, I really don't care what their credit is. If I wanted to know, I see the next question about how do I determine credit worthiness. If I'm concerned about their credit and their ability to pay, I call and I talk to the borrower, and I will tell them I'm buying the note, and as part of that process, I need to pull your credit. And if I pull your credit, it's going to lower your credit score by 4 points. However, if you pull your credit using like Credit Karma, and you won't believe how many people use Credit Karma. I mean, almost everybody does. So you say Credit Karma or freecreditreport.com. If you pull your own credit and then make sure you get one that has the scores included and send it to me, that way it will not affect your credit score. And so that's what I do for them. And then I can look at the score. It's pretty much score driven at that point. However, I would look to see, like if you have somebody who's had multiple foreclosures, or, you know, you can tell that they're just a chronic deadbeat, then I'm less likely to want to buy that note. I'm very understanding about good people getting into situations, especially with this current economic situation in the pandemic. And so I'm more like, if they had great credit history and paid on time and they've just run into problems in the last 12 months, I'm going to look at that way different than someone who's always had bad credit. So it would be that kind of a thing. But by the way, I did think of something that I have changed since that stimulus training came out. It used to be that doing the borrower's interview was one of the last things that I did. And the reason it was one of the last things was because I didn't want to tip them off that the note was for sale. And yeah, I do have it under contract, but nonetheless, I didn't want them going back to the note seller and saying, hey, why didn't you tell me you were selling the note? I just inherited money from my mom and I could pay you off. Why don't you give me the discount? And so I would always wait until I was almost ready to close, so that there was really no time for them to do that. And the note seller, even if they were inclined to do it, if they know they're being wired money in 2 or 3 days, they're not going to jump ship at that point. However, because of the pandemic, calling the borrower is the first thing that I do. I call the borrower now before I order the credit or order the title or the appraisal. Just last week, I had a note, and it was, I couldn't, they didn't have a picture available, and there was nothing online. And it's like one of those rules, never quote on something you can't see. However, there was like $100,000 worth of equity in this property, based on the online values, and 50,000 based on the actual, like the assessed value. that, from the auditor's site. And so I thought, well, I don't know what it looks like, but the value's there. So I went ahead and quoted it. And meanwhile, we asked the note seller for photos. He went and took current photos, and it was a dive. It was a dive. And I'm thinking, I know the 2 acres can't be worth $175,000. And so, I talked to my student, and I said, we need to find out what the condition of this house is on the inside. And that's when I got the idea, you know what, I'm just going to call the borrower right now. So I called the borrower, and come to find out, it was a single mom with 3 children. She did have perfect pay history. She's a nurse, pays on time like clockwork, worked 2 jobs just to make sure that she did pay. But found out the furnace hasn't been working. And last year they used a propane heater and electric heaters. And there's a couple outlets that sparks fly out of. I'm going, oh my gosh. And so needless to say, I never ordered the title, never ordered the appraisal. We just called the guy and said, I'm sorry, we cannot buy this. And clearly, the online value on those properties was $100,000 off. But you can find out a lot of stuff from the borrower by calling them. It also gives you a really good feel when you talk to them for what kind of people they are, and if it's somebody that you want to work with for the next 20 or 30 years.
So William actually had a good follow-up question there. Can you get in trouble if you pull their credit if they remain obstinate about Credit Karma?
No, as long as you have a written contract to buy the note. If you do, you have a legitimate business reason to pull their credit. I used to belong to the credit bureau for years, and as long as I had it under contract, I didn't call the people then. I just pulled the credit. We did that. That was the first thing we did. However, the credit bureaus are very, very particular that you have to have a brick and mortar office. They want to make sure that, your family's not walking around and guests in your house aren't walking past your desk and seeing, social security numbers and things laying out. They want to make sure that you have locked file cabinets and all that kind of stuff. So when I closed my office, I also then gave up my membership to the credit bureau. But that's when I started using the Credit Karma and having them pull their own. It's never been a problem. Never, never, never.
So I think in Vicky's questions here, one of them that let's see. So are there any red flags on a credit report which would cause you to pass on a payer?
Multiple foreclosures or a recent bankruptcy. And the recent bankruptcy wouldn't make me pass on it, but I would want more information.
And what is the minimum payment history you're looking for when you buy a note for your own portfolio?
I want a 12-month pay history. Now, if it's a newer note and they've put 20% down, if they have an excellent credit score and they've put down a large down payment, I might buy it after 3 months of pay history. If there is less than 10% down, then you absolutely need a year of pay history. On time pay history.
And how do you handle a note seller who misrepresents the payment history? Does that happen often or at all?
No, because we're asking for provable pay history. So they can't misrepresent it because they're sending you copies of it's usually copies of their bank statements, and they highlight, that particular payment. I suppose if it was $500 a month and they had 3 different payments of $500 coming in that month, how would you know which one it went to? In that case, I'd probably use a pay history affidavit right along with it. I'd also confirm payments were made with the borrower. But I can't say I've ever had anybody misrepresent the pay history. I do think some of them have misrepresented the down payment. I don't know whether it was intentional or they just forgot. But again, we always require proof of that, which we get from the settlement statement. If somebody does not have a settlement statement, that's a red flag to me that maybe there really wasn't a down payment.
Gotcha. All right, we're going to move into some general questions here. William asks, how do I differentiate myself as a note buyer versus a note broker?
Great question, William. There is actually a really good diagram and explanation of that in the 2019 media set, as well as in the master guide. But I do still want to answer that, but because it shows it as a diagram very nicely, you might want to refer to that as well. So to be a note buyer, what I would say that you want to be a note dealer, okay? And to be a note dealer, you have to act as a principal in the transaction. So you're going to buy the note, you're going to actually own it, and your name will be on the record as owning it, and then you resell it. So even though you involve the note seller and your end buyer, you are in the middle of it. You bought the note and you resold the note. You did not broker that. If you were brokering it, the way that would work is you'd say, oh, Sam, you want to sell your note? Hey, Irene, you want to buy a note? Meet Sam. You guys pay me $35,000. Then in that case, you just brokered it. If the loan agreement is originated direct from Sam to Irene, and you just collect a fee for bringing them together, that's brokering. Now, there is another way to act as a principal, and that is by getting the contract executed with Sam. So he's agreed to sell you the note for a certain price. That is now an asset that you own, and it has value. So you could sell or assign your note purchase agreement or contract to Irene Investor, and she could write you a check for $35,000 because she's buying the contract. You didn't just put Sam and her together. She's buying the right to buy the note from Sam at the price you negotiated. And so in that situation, you are also a principal and not a broker. So that's why it's important to follow the strategies as I've laid them out, because I'm very cognizant of what these laws are and what you need to make sure that you're safe. So when you're buying a note, when you are flipping a note, you want to either use a simultaneous close or an assignment of contract. I go into detail on those and all the Sam and Bill examples that you'll find every place.
Okay, great. Terry asks, how would I add missed payments from COVID-19 to the principal amount to avoid the buyer defaulting? How would escrow handle taxes and insurance in this case?
Okay, as far as adding to the principal balance, what I would do is I would do a modification of some type. You might agree upfront that you will give a moratorium for 3 months or 6 months. And what I would do is I would calculate this out. And I actually did that with my notes, and I found it barely affected my rate of return, like maybe 0.25%. I mean, it was nothing. And when you think about what it would have been if I had foreclosed and had to redo the house and all of that. So figure out how much you're willing to do. And I would have an attorney draw up a modification that says that you agree that they do not have to make payments for 6 months and that interest will continue to accrue on the principal balance. That's important because if you don't continue to accrue the interest, then that could really affect your rate of return. But I'm willing to say you can skip payments, but interest is going to continue to accrue. Now, you could just take the amount of the 6 payments and add a balloon on at the end. I do not recommend that. I'm going to even take that back. I wouldn't do that now because of Dodd-Frank. I'd be more afraid that you'd violate Dodd-Frank by doing that. And maybe not. Every state is different, and it would depend on what the default laws are, because that would not be Dodd-Frank, it'd be default laws. But here, a better way to do it is say, okay, I'll give you a moratorium on 6 payments and I will extend the term of your loan by 6 months. And then you could even re-amortize it if you want. Here would be my thing, that it's possible they could go 6 months and still need a couple more months. So you could set it up, but then you might need to go back and redo it again. And basically, you can get an attorney to write up anything you agree to. But the general gist of it is give them a moratorium on payments. Interest continues to accrue over that time, and extend the term of the loan for however many payments you forgave or said that they could have a moratorium on. Now, how does escrow handle taxes and insurance in this case? Well, that's something you're going to have to work out. If it were me, I would tell them, look, I will forgive or give you a moratorium on principal and interest, but you have to pay the taxes and the insurance. And because otherwise you have to come out of pocket on that. It's one thing not to get a payment. It's another thing to have to cough up the money to pay the insurance and the taxes. If they do not have the money to do that, and you do, then you could advance that. Technically, you probably have a default rate in your mortgage that allows you to collect a higher interest rate on taxes and insurance that you pay for. That's something that you have to do according to your conscience. If I was working something out with them, I would not charge them the default rate. If I decided that it was worth it for me to work something out with them and they could not pay the taxes and insurance, I would say, I will pay it, and everything I pay, I will add on to the balance of the loan. And from the day that I spend that money, I'm going to accrue interest at whatever the note rate is. That's how I would do it. And again, be sure that you put that in the modification agreement. It's really important that you document whatever changes that you have made. And I do recommend you use an attorney for the modification.
Very interesting. I have a follow-up on that. So if you see a note like that come in with a moratorium agreement like that, are you going to consider that performing?
Yes. It's that's kind of like people who are on a payment plan for their taxes. They were in default at one time, but now they set up a payment plan, and if they're paying on time, I'm not saying I always accept that. It just made me think of that. So I would accept it, but I would also take a serious look at it. I'm not saying I would just accept it across the board, but that alone would not cause me to say, I'm not buying that note. They're on a moratorium. I would want to know, how much equity is in the property, where do they work, what's the possibility of them going back to work, I need to just reevaluate it on that basis, understanding that most of this country is not working right now. I mean, it's not like these folks are necessarily, they might be, but there's a good chance that these are nice, respectable, responsible people that always paid on time. And the only reason they're not paying is because their businesses were shut down. That's not their fault. I have somebody that I was talking with today, and it's a note that I'm in the process of closing on. And it was a real interesting talk with this lady. Over the course of talking with her, I found out that she was writing her, I think she called it a dissertation. Is it a dissertation for a master's? Isn't that what you write? Or is that for your PhD? I don't know, because I didn't even graduate college. But anyway, she's not only a high school teacher, but she's also a college teacher. She said teacher, not professor. I don't know. But anyway, my point is that in speaking with her, I came to realize that, man, this is a really hardworking woman, and somebody that I'd really like to have owe me money, because she's doing everything she needs to do to make sure that that is paid. The same with that other house that I told you about, where the woman with the 3 kids, She was working 2 jobs now. The second job was to save money to pay for that furnace. I mean, she is exactly the kind of person that I would have liked to have bought that note. And if they had told me that she was on a 3-month moratorium, I would have worked with that. The issue was not her. The issue was no furnace. And it was extremely dangerous and I think morally wrong. I don't know for sure, but I'm of the impression that it was like that when the man sold it to her. And he knew that she was a single mom with 3 kids struggling. And I think it's unconscionable that he would have sold her a house without a working furnace and with issues with the electric. And her comment was that the property needed a lot of TLC and that they're replacing carpet that was 50 years old. I mean, it sounds like the guy didn't do anything to it. But did you see the difference? Like, you want to know, are these hardworking people that really take their promise to pay serious, and do they put their mortgage at the top of their list, right along with food that they're going to take care of? That's what I look at.
Hey, Donna, Linda had a good follow-up to our last set of questions. When the loan gets modified, there's costs associated with that. How does that get paid? Does that get lumped into the modification?
I would absolutely include that as part of your cost that they need to pay.
All right, cool. All right, so next question is from Sandra. What are your thoughts on the proposed idea that note or mortgage holders will have to hold licenses or default insurance for each note or mortgage they own if it is not their primary residence? Do you know how likely this is to happen?
I have not heard that. I'd like to know where she heard that from. I can't imagine holding a license for each note or mortgage they own. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, Sandra, if you want to send us a source or some news on that, Donna would probably be happy to look into that.
Default insurance? I mean, are they talking mortgage insurance like you would use on a conforming mortgage? I've never heard of this, and so I can't really address it.
All right. So Sandra, if you have something on that, send it to us and we'll look into it. All right. So Dave has the next set of questions here. What happens if a payer can't qualify to refinance when the balloon comes due? What is the note holder's remedy? I understand you can restructure, but can you forfeit via foreclosure?
You absolutely could forfeit by foreclosure. They are obligated to pay that balloon when it is due. What you need to ask yourself is it worth it to work out some kind of a extension on it or give them more time or whatever needs to be done, versus if you foreclose, what condition is the property in? How long will it take you to sell it? How much money do you need to put into it? I will tell you that when I have a note that has a balloon on it, if I do not think that they are going to be able to refinance, then when I quote it, I assume that they're not going to be able to. So I don't modify the note to take away the balloon, but I base my price as though there is no balloon. So if the balloon came due and they couldn't pay and I just had to wait and let them pay for 20 years and pay it off, I still know I'd make my 10% return or whatever it was that I put in there. So you definitely want to keep that in mind when you're evaluating a note that has a balloon.
Okay. Susan had a few questions here. How did you first learn these note buying strategies?
I actually was going to set up my own property management company because I'd managed a downtown high rise, an office park, a 500 unit complex. I had 8 years of experience in that. And at our local RIA group, I had an attorney that spoke on asset protection. He mentioned he had tons of properties. And so I called him up. I said, I have an offer you can't refuse. Took him to lunch, said, hey, I figure I need to find somebody who will really appreciate my services. And it sounds like you will. And so he said, well, he was in the process of selling everything off. He wanted to start a mortgage company, and would I be interested in running it if he taught me the business? And so I worked under him for 2 years before I started my own. And it was an awesome opportunity. But I would have never gotten it if I would have made that call to him and taken the initiative to say, hey, I'm your person, So that's how I learned.
So this one's maybe a little bit of a fun question, but what is your favorite deal you've done this year?
Oh, I've got one. I've got a couple actually, but the one that came to mind is we had a deal this summer that there was not enough room. If I split the deal 50-50 with my student, there wasn't enough room to make it worth our while to do. And so this is where my new option thing came in that I came up with it a couple years ago, but it was a perfect application. And so what I wound up doing was I bought the entire note and I borrowed money from an investor to buy the note, but I got an option to keep the tail end of the note. And not only what I did was, instead of taking my profit when we flipped it and closed it, my profit was when they pay off. And so instead of making like 5,000, it was about 5,000, 4,000 something. I gave that to my student, and then I'll wind up making about 15,000 when it pays off, which is great for me because I did it in my IRA. And at that point, I'll be able to pull it out tax-free. That's a very, very sweet deal.
Nice. That would be my favorite too.
I love those kind of things. That's what I thrive on. See, I teach you guys how to flip notes because that's what I've done for years. That's how I started. But the real fun begins when you start being creative with them. And if you're looking to put lump sums of money into your self-directed IRA, that option strategy is totally, totally awesome.
Awesome. All right. So Susan also asked, can you give an example of a deal that fell through last minute and what lesson you learned from it?
Well, actually, I have a note that we thought was going to fall through, but I believe I've come up with a remedy. I have to call the lady tonight. So I've worked on this deal now for over a month. It looked like a great deal. Only when I got the payoff on the underlying mortgage, the escrow was a couple $1,000s short. And so I spent a lot of time on the phone with the loan company and went through line by line. Long story short, there was no insurance on the property. The roof had been patched. And I saw this on the appraisal, and I contacted the homeowner, and she says, oh, I had a roofer come over. There's no holes in the roof. It's just that there's different color shingles. And she assured me that it was fixed properly. Well, she had just gotten new insurance in August. And what Quicken Loans told me was that insurance had canceled because of underwriting issues. And I called the insurance company and found out that it was because the roof was patched. And so what I did was, yesterday I called the note seller and I said, look, I gave you a quote based on this being like top of the line note, no pay problems, this is a sure thing, great equity, all this kind of stuff. I said, this note is nothing like that at all. I talked to the borrower, this, and this, the payment's gone up $300 a month because of all these insurance problems. The escrow was going up. And I said, she's worried that she's not going to be able to keep the house. And so I was able to lower my price by $10,000. So that gives me $10,000 more to make it worth my time to work with this man on it. And he has agreed to put a new roof on the house because the lady could not afford it herself. So he's putting a new roof on it. And I'm going to add the cost of that roof to the note that I'm buying. So I will get that extra money over time. And the reason that I'm justifying that is because of the extra risk. Now that I know that this is a lot tighter for her than I had originally thought. So it's going to be interesting, but I think this is really a good thing. I did have another deal this summer that fell through that we could not revive. It was the same kind of a thing. It was water damage from a hurricane. Although I did hear like 2 or 3 weeks ago that they had contractors in there, and that as soon as the insurance company inspects it, they were going to call us back. So maybe they will. Okay, did that cover that?
That's, yes, good example. So underwriting issues with the property insurance and stuff.
So the lesson I learned from that is if it's in a hurricane area, you may want an internal inspection of the property, or not even like on the roof. I could have sent an inspector. I also learned that even though it was okay with me, if the roof was properly patched, it's not okay with insurance companies. And if your insurance gets canceled, it could be like they told me that it would be hard for her to get other insurance. They could probably get it done, but it's going to cost her a lot more money. So be aware of any damage from hurricanes.
Excellent. All right. So Vicky asked, can you explain the difference between a mortgage and a deed of trust?
Yes. For a mortgage, if you want to foreclose, it requires a judicial foreclosure, which means that you actually have to file a lawsuit and sue the people, which takes a long period of time. In the last downturn, if you had a mortgage in Cleveland, Ohio, it took 3 years, over 3 years, just to get heard, just to have your case heard, let alone complete. So in a mortgage state, it takes much longer to foreclose. In a deed of trust state, it does not require a judicial foreclosure. In a deed of trust, what you're doing is the owner of the property is basically giving the deed temporarily, conditionally, I should say, to a trustee, which is usually somebody appointed by the state or a title company or attorney. And they put the title in that trustee's name. And as long as the borrower pays on time, once they pay off the loan, then it is deeded, it's extinguished, and the property then is free and clear again. If they don't pay, this deed of trust gives the trustee the right, at the instruction of the lender, to set up a trustee sale and basically sell the property at a trustee sale. So that can be done. In some places, it's like 6 weeks or something like that. So it's much, much faster in a deed of trust state. But both of them provide security for a note, but it's how you foreclose that is the big difference.
Great. All right. Let's see. Lyle had a couple questions. First being, is buying and selling notes considered passive income? How many deals before it's considered active income?
In my opinion, buying and selling notes is active income because you have to actively go buy them, and then you have to actively sell them in order to collect some money. To me, you cross over to a passive investor when you've made enough money. You could flip all these notes and you make 50,000 there and 35 there and 100 over there and 10 here. And now you have enough money where you can actually go and purchase a note. When you buy a note to hold, now it becomes passive because the money comes into your bank account, even if you never do anything else to that note. So that's how you get to passive income. You flip notes actively, take your profits, and invest in notes to hold. And that is true passive income.
Great. Great answer. All right. So, and then he also asked, do notes in a solo 401k need to stay in there for a certain amount of time to be considered passive and exempt from Ubit?
I honestly don't know the answer to that. I would recommend that you ask your IRA trustee.
All right.
I think, though, that Ubit No, if you flip them. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm just going to defer that you should call your trustee and ask them that.
If you don't have a trustee, who should they use?
Camo plan, highly recommended. Carl Fisher is an awesome gentleman, and the way he set up his company, they are great to work with. Very little red tape, easy to get your deals done. They're quick, efficient, really on top of things, and they have a great understanding of notes. Carl was investing with me in notes way before he ever set up Camo Plan. So he is a note investor and fully understands it. Plus, you can set up with them and they don't charge you any fees until you actually buy your first note. Okay. And if you want to set up with them, you get some kind of a special thing. I don't know if it's a discount or what, but go to my website, thenotebuyer.com, and scroll down. And Matthew, what do they see? Is it a green?
Yeah, there's a Camo Plan banner. I went ahead and put the link in here as well.
Oh, great. Perfect. Thank you for that. But do sign up through me because you do get a benefit.
And you can send them an email or give them a call. They're great. They're happy to answer questions and help you out. All right, Donna, we had a non-performing note question from Muzil. Will you entertain the purchase of an NPN portfolio from a local bank?
Not anymore. Well, I shouldn't say not anymore. I spent about 3 months, probably about 20 years ago, and thought that I wanted to get into buying pools, and I didn't like it at all. I believe that if you're going to buy large pools, it's more than what one person should take on. If I'm going to buy a pool, basically what I'm going to do is evaluate each individual note and add them all up and say, here, this is what I'll pay for it. But I think that if you're actively buying pools, there is software that you can buy or create your own software, and you'll have various points that you want to evaluate to determine what's the risk involved and how much you want to pay. And I think that's very important to have those things in place. I think you need a whole team of people to handle the pool. And quite frankly, I'm just not interested in that. I can make more money with less headaches just doing the deals that I do rather than get involved with a big pool of non-performing notes. My opinion is that you can make a lot of money on non-performing notes, but they're just a lot of headache. I'd rather, even if it's making a little bit less, I'd rather do it and enjoy what I'm doing. That's my personal opinion. I'm not saying that you should have that opinion. I'm just saying that I did non-performing notes for about 10 years. And yes, I helped a lot of people. The last one that I did, I saved my good friend literally almost $500,000. It was like 491,000 or something like that. I saved her on her mortgage. So, I mean, I know how to do it. I know I help people and everything. But I got to tell you, it's also very depressing because there's some people that you can't help. And I got really burnt out in doing that, my opinion.
All right. So now we have some questions about investors and things like that. Let's see. I know Andre's here, so I'm going to skip to his question actually. So Andre said, what are the legal and tax implications of buying a note from or selling to a non-US citizen? Are foreign investors able to participate as a principal in the transactions like domestic investors?
I actually do have a foreign investor that has bought a lot of notes from me, but I don't know the answer to your question because that's between him and his accountant and his attorneys, and I'm not privy to that. But I've definitely sold to foreign investors, so I know it can be done. But if I were you, I would check with your CPA or attorney.
Probably need an LLC here or something. Okay. Fred had a few questions. Let's see. Would you share what it looked like to have an office and people working for you doing note deals? How many hired roles, compensation, and why did you shut it down?
I hate to be negative because what it looked like for me was I had 7 employees, 2,500 square foot office, and $35,000 a month overhead. Is that enough said? I hated the responsibility of it all. I hated having employees, especially with the downturn and when, like, I felt like it was my obligation to keep them on. Even when we weren't making good money, I was making good money, so I kept them on. And I decided I could make more money myself working from home, get rid of the $35,000 a month overhead, do my own deals by myself with Matthew's help. Now, don't get any ideas, Matthew. That was 7 people I had working for me. But at that time, we were doing a ton of non-performing notes, and we would run a pipeline of like over 50 deals at a time. And it just was so cumbersome. It's like people think like, oh, you make all this money, but you got to keep in mind with making that much money comes that much more expenses. And, you've got your salaries and, just everything. And I'm not saying that you should not do that, but you have to want to run a business and run it like a business and be full-fledged into it. And if you are, I will tell you that you will make great money. That's just not me anymore. I have 6 grandkids. I love my life. I love being able to decide when and where I want to work. If I want to take off in the summertime because my grandkids are coming over to swim, I can do that. But you know what I love? I love being able to work all day in my flannel nightgown and nobody knows it. Well, now everybody knows it. I guess I shouldn't have said that on there. And I don't often do that, but I'm just saying that if I want to. But when I had the office, every day I had to get up and go to work. I felt like I was babysitting all the time. And I just got fed up with it. And I just was so much happier when I downsized and moved back home. And I love where I'm at in life right now. And I could not do it without notes.
So if somebody wanted to do what you did, you'd say go for it.
Yes, but if you don't have, it's more than just knowing how to do notes. You need to know how to set up the infrastructure of a business. And you need all the pieces. You need a team of people. You need to realize you can't do everything. You also need to realize that you might go through 3 or 4 people before you find somebody that you're happy with to do it. But if you like doing that, and if you're younger than me, then it might be a perfect thing. There's a lot of money to be made in notes. And that's why I say I don't want to be negative about it, because it could be a great thing for you to start an office and do all of that. But where I'm at in life, I've already been there, done that. And I'm really loving what I'm doing now.
And Donna, your students, I mean, they have all kinds of goals, right? I mean, you have students that are just looking for 1 or 2 good deals a year for their,
That's the beauty of notes. You can totally tailor make it to be as busy or not busy as you want to be, to make as much money as you want, or just make a little bit of extra here and there. It totally depends on what your goals are.
That's right. All right. So Fred had a question about your private lending program. What information or documents do you request as proof the property is producing income?
Well, first of all, keep in mind that I'm very selective on who I have as borrowers. So I pretty much know that they are honest, responsible people that are successful real estate investors, landlords that have a number of rental properties. And all of their properties, the properties that they put up at a 50% or less loan to value, and they're free and clear. So what I'm asking them for is I want pictures inside and out, and I want copies of leases. I guess I could ask for bank statements and show deposits, but the people that I'm working with, I don't need that, because I've been working with them for years and they always pay on time, and I know the quality of their work and everything. But if it were somebody new that I did not know, then I would ask for probably bank statements showing the rents deposited.
Okay. And what is your elevator speech to investors for notes or private loans?
I show people how they can make 10 or 15% on their money, all secured by real estate. And in fact, a lot of times they wind up making 40, 50, 60% on their money. And it's great because it's virtually risk-free because it's all secured by low loan to value real estate. And guess what? They have none of the tenants, trash, and toilets to deal with. Was that short enough?
Nice. Yeah. I kind of reworded his question. He was wondering how to talk with them, but that's the gist of it there. All right. We got to Andre's question. Okay. We had several questions come up about partials from one Cheryl. So let's jump in. I think some of these will be fun for you, Donna.
Is that Cheryl from Tennessee?
Not sure. Cheryl, are you on here? Are you from Tennessee? Put it in the chat. You want to jump into these? Let's see here. So how do you track the timeline of your notes, especially on a partial, so that the process is smooth once the partial completes?
I do everything kind of old school. What I do is I put it on in my calendar and I move it forward. So, I mean, I that's what I do. I also keep in mind, it's not like I have 300 notes that I'm keeping track of. I have all of the notes that that are active. I have them all in my credenza right there. And so I'm always in there looking at the files. I totally know what's going to pay off. I'll put Post-it notes, like a flag, check in June of whatever, that kind of thing. Basically, I do it old school, but that's what works for me.
Okay. Let's see. Could you give us an overview of how partials work as a refresher?
That's a little bit hard to do in the short amount of time that we have here. I have done so much online. You absolutely have that. And I'm not trying to get out of it. It's just that I don't have the slides prepared here. I talk about it every time that I do a presentation. I would recommend that you go to the 2019 media set. It is really chock full with lots of partial examples, and I would study that. Partials are one of my favorite things to do. I've kind of moved from that, and I'm using the option agreement now. It gives me better flexibility and better control. But I've used the partials for years, and I made a lot of money with them, still making money on them.
Awesome. How does title insurance work when buying a partial?
Title insurance insures the title. And so you're going to have title insurance when the note is originated, and you could sell any part of that note and the title insurance goes to the next holder. As a holder in due course, you would be insured under that same title policy.
All right. If a note seller sells the back end of a note I have a partial on, is that buyer responsible to contact me? How do I get their information?
So the thing is that normally I keep the back end of the note. I don't buy the front end of a note.
Why?
Because it's the nature of the business. I'm buying a note from somebody and I'm selling the front end to an investor. I would not want to sell the back end to an investor. And I don't think most investors want to buy the back end. They want the safest part of the deal, which is the front end. If you really were in the situation that you mentioned, and I doubt that you would be, but if you were, then all you do is just put whatever you want into your partial purchase agreement. So you would say that this note is not assignable, that neither one of you or one, whoever holds the back end cannot assign the other, just make it flat out, cannot be sold to somebody else, or they have to give you first right of refusal on it if they decide they want to sell it. But basically, the partial purchase agreement controls what happens during the time that two parties are participating in the note. And you can put whatever you want to in there. For example, if you, Like, I would not want to give up the control of foreclosing on the property, because if I said that the person who owns the front end can do the foreclosing and they don't know how to foreclose and they don't foreclose right away, I could lose my back end. So I would rather put in mind that they must notify me anytime a note's 30 days late. And at that point, then I can stipulate whatever I want, that I buy them out, that I simply take over and foreclose and then pay them off at the sale, or, you know, whatever you want, you can put in that partial purchase agreement.
Cheryl did hop in the chat and say it is Cheryl from Tennessee.
Hey.
So she had just a couple more questions here on that. Let's see. How do I know when to stop receiving payments on a partial and pass it on to the back end note buyer if the payer is paying extra towards the principal each month?
How do I know when to stop? So when you do a partial, it's paragraph 2 of the partial purchase agreement, you are going to run an amortization schedule of what whoever's holding the front end of the partial. You're going to run an amortization schedule that sets forth what that investor is entitled to receive. It might be 30 payments of $500 each or whatever. So if they pay extra, you use the same original principal amount, the same interest rate, but you simply readjust that amortization to what payments were actually made. And as soon as that original amount, it's called the net present value, as soon as that investor is paid off, anything over and above that goes to the holder of the tail end of the note. So it's all determined by your amortization schedule. And so it's very matter of fact. It's not in a gray area. It is exact to the penny what happens.
All right. And last question she had about the partials. What happens if I foreclose on a house I own a partial on? Do I get a portion of the foreclosure sale? Do I split legal fees with the other note buyer? Do I have to put these terms in the partial purchase agreement?
That should all be spelled out ahead of time before it happens. It should be spelled out in the note purchase agreement. Yeah, I mean, and you can write in whatever you want. So Cheryl, if this is the Cheryl from Tennessee that I spent time with in Philadelphia, you need to call me.
And Donna, what William asked, what are you recommending now? Your new options or partials or?
Well, you can certainly still do the partials, but I've been working on the options for about 3 or 4 years. And I find that I have better control of the situation. I have total control of the situation. And I like them better for that reason. I also like them better because they clearly define each person's role. So it's very clear when I'm going to own the note. Excuse me, I sell the note to my investor. The investor owns the note. So he is the one who owns the note, but I have the option to buy back my part of the note. So it's very clear, and everybody has their own role. There's no question, like what we're talking about right here on what happens in the event of foreclosure, that is spelled out actually in the option agreement. But since 2 people don't own the note at the same time, I think that everybody's more aware of their specific role in the note. I just think it's a cleaner way to do it. And I like the fact that I'm in control. If you're interested in the options, I introduced that at this past academy. And I went through that in detail, and I included all of the documentation for that. Matthew, is that on our website? Is that available for people to buy now?
It's included in the 2020 World Tour replay set.
Oh, that is, yeah, that is the academy. That's what we just had the special on, right?
That's right. Still going.
The special is still going?
2 more days.
I honestly did not know that. So if people want that, they can go to the website
That's right.
and get the 2020 World Tour replays.
That's right.
Okay. That was a different, it was a totally different academy than what I have done in the past. It was not just a matter of doing a new version of the same thing. It was completely different, and I had a ball with it. It was one of the most fun things I've ever done. And I took 5 notes and had everybody evaluate them, and we went through the entire evaluation. And then I walked everybody through an entire deal and went through all the documentation on a flip. And then I taught the option and strategy, and I put all the documentation for the option strategy in there. And then I finished up with the private lending. So there's lots of new stuff in that. It's well worth the money if you're interested in any of those things.
All right, so we're through all the email questions. Would you like to take some time to answer the questions that came up as we were going, Donna?
Sure.
All right. So got a few of them as well. Let's see. So Manuel asked, what do you recommend to someone who wants to start out buying notes to wholesale to other note buyers? And for someone who is buying notes, do you recommend that they buy the note using a self-directed Roth IRA?
Okay. Well, if you're wanting to buy notes and wholesale to other note buyers, you're basically just doing the easiest 1, 2, 3. Well, you're not doing the coaching, but you're doing the standard flip that we do. Here's what I would do. I would do your first deal with me with the easiest 1, 2, 3 coaching. So you can see the process from start to finish on how to buy a note and flip it to an investor. And from that point on, now you have intimate insight on how that works. You simply just switch over and use your own investors and handle that yourself. I mean, this is what you're asking me is exactly what I'm teaching people to do. That's the whole point, is that you don't have to keep selling to me and using my investors. I teach people how to set up their own investor base, and then ultimately you're going to flip deals to your investor. Whether or not to use your IRA depends on, do you need the cash now? If you need the cash to live off of, then you probably want to do it outside your IRA, unless you're in a position with a Roth IRA and you're of age where you can start taking the money out tax-free. In that case, you run it through your IRA, you close on it the next day, pull it out, and you don't even pay any tax on it. But if you're not in that position, then I would only use your IRA for deals where you want the profit to be kept for your retirement.
All right. Manuel also asked, where does he get the stimulus training for note buying?
Manuel, I think that you should email Matthew and talk to him directly. If you're a new student, I think you need to talk to Matthew, because it's going to be different for different people. So please reach out to Matthew at info@thenotebuyer.com.
Yeah, reach out to me. Donna put this training together for students, so we want to get you set up with, everything that you'll need to get started with that. Let's see. Clara Risa, I hope I said your name right. She asked, is there a limit to the amount of notes you can hold under one LLC or corporation?
I'm not aware of any, but I am not an attorney. But even though there's no limit, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I would group your notes into quality of notes. I just don't think it's good to keep all of your stuff in one basket, so that if there was ever a problem and they pierced the veil, and they will do that on an LLC as well, believe it or not, I just don't think I would spread it out. I might, depending on the value of the note, I might have $500,000 in one LLC and then start another one. or, I mean, it just depends, but I would not have in mind just to put everything into one LLC forever and ever. I think you need to be more diversified.
All right. Mike asked, when I buy leads from one of the search sites, are these exclusive, or am I getting the same ones that others are getting?
Normally, you're getting the same ones that other people are getting. If you buy from Scott Arpan with, what is the name of his website? Do you know that off the top?
Notesellerlist.com?
Notesellerlist.com. If he knows that you're my student, he will not give my same students the same leads. And he guarantees that for a certain amount of time. I want to say it's 6 months or something like that. I don't remember for sure. But that way, if I'm doing a promotion and everybody calls him up, a note seller is not going to get 20 postcards all the same. He's very careful and very diligent about that. But anybody else, it's just a random thing.
All right. Let's see here. Christine had a few questions. What goes into your yield considerations?
We look at the equity in the property, we look at the terms of the note, and we look at the quality of the borrower. And that is explained in detail in the stimulus training, the 8-hour stimulus training. It's in everything that I do because it's so vital. You can also get it in the 2019 media set and in the Note and Master Guide itself. Note Buyer's Master Guide itself.
Okay, which situations warrant paying par for a note?
Very seldom. I do sell my private loans at par. But if I'm buying an existing seller carryback, it is always going to have a minimum of a 5% discount. And the reason for that is that if it pays off early, you need to be compensated. You might have cashed out of some other investment. You might have an appraisal. You could have $1,500 in costs if you paid the closing cost, appraisal, and title. Or if you have to foreclose, God forbid, you need to have a cushion of equity in there. So generally speaking, on seller carrybacks, the most I'm ever going to pay is 95 cents on the dollar. With private loans, those are a little different because basically they're a brand new loan. I've completely underwritten everything myself. And so it's as though it's almost like you're lending them the money. I just was the one who put the deal together and did all the underwriting and everything for you. So I do sell those at par, but I never sell a seller carryback at par.
All right, I'm going to move on to Jared had a couple questions also. Why do you like to use Camo Plan versus other self-directed companies?
Oh, you don't want to know all of that. The problem is this is on a recorded line. There are a lot of different IRA trustees out there. They are not all the same. There are some companies that are so large that they have so much red tape that it is almost impossible to do deals with them. And when in fact somebody tells me that that is their trustee, I cringe. And quite frankly, sometimes have said, I don't think this is a good note for you. I think I need to go to a different investor. If I have to close quickly, there are some trustees that I know will not close in time, and I can't risk losing the deal for that. I mean, I'm talking about trustees who I've submitted all my documentation. They did not even change a comma in it, and it took them 8 days to close after my student investor paid the expediting fee to get it done in 2 days. I have a problem with that. And that's the biggest reason. Also, if some trustees do not understand notes, They have no concept of what it is to buy a note, and you're trying to close a deal, and they put restrictions on you and demands, and you can't do that. It's like, are you an idiot or something? I would never go to the borrower and ask them for that. The borrower, it's not something you would ask. They have no reason to give you that. For example, I'm making this up, but they might say, we've got to have the tax returns of the borrower. Are you kidding me? This note was put in place, originated 3 years ago. You can't go back to the borrower and ask now for tax returns. And it's that kind of stuff where they just don't know the nature of notes. And that's why I like Camo Plan, because they all understand notes and they get the deal done. One of the things that they do, Donna, her name is, who she's the one I always work with anyway, but they don't take calls from people until afternoon, because in the morning time, they're doing all their due diligence, calling whoever, title companies and getting everything set up to close your deal in time. I love working with them. They're easy, and their fees are lower than most people's.
Joe asked if you have any experience with a company called NewView.
I have heard of them, but I have not personally done any deals with them.
All right, let's see here. So Jared asks, he's got a lot of different opinions on flipping a note to put more cash into his IRA, but he wants to know what your thoughts are about that.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, that's what I do.
Yes, good idea, Jared. Go ahead with that. All right. Imran asks, are there third-party companies who can pull a borrower's credit report for me?
You mean on the sly or for real?
I did a cursory Google search on that, and it looked like there might be, but I'm not sure.
I've never used any. I don't know the answer to that. I really honestly don't know. But I'm telling you, it really does work very well just to do what I said and call the borrower, explain that when you pull the credit, it's going to ding their credit report for several points. But if they'll just pull it and give it to you, it won't. They love that you tell them that you're looking out for them. I have never had a borrower refuse to get me the credit report. Never.
Yeah, they don't want their credit report to get dinged. They're happy to do it. Elena asks, what with the low interest rate right now, is it harder to buy notes?
No, this is a great time for doing notes, because the people are not working. They need money, and they're selling their notes like crazy right now.
Linda had asked where she can find the full details on your new option, but we already answered that with that's available in the 2020 World Tour, Academy World Tour replays, drawn special right now. Let's see, Vicky, who does Donna use to service the notes she keeps in her portfolio? It's
a variety of servicers, because many times, in fact, nowadays, it's almost most of the time, the note already has a servicer, and it's much easier to keep it with that servicer than switching to another one. So, and the thing is, most of the servicers are regional. There are some national servicers, but the ones that I'm using for all of mine, most of them are title companies. Usually it's First American Title. I hold a lot of notes out west. And so Guardian Title is one I use. I've got a number of them with different branches of First American, Pioneer Title, August REI, Note Servicing Center. Some of the national companies are Evergreen, Allied. Those are the ones that I would look at first. I do not like FCI.
Okay. Let's see here. Next question from William. And we actually had a few questions. Jonas also asked something similar. What do you expect the new year to look like for notes? Do you have any idea what January will look like in particular?
Really good. See, I do know over the years that, people are caught up with Christmas. They were caught up with the election. I'm seeing quotes coming in now. And I think that come January, we're going to get a ton. It'll be a lot of people ready to sell.
Oh, by the way, Jonas said that he also made a comment that he met you 13 years ago in New York City and said, congrats, he's glad to see you're still in the game.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that at the Java Center?
I'm not sure. He had to sign off. He's not on right now.
Oh, okay.
He's going to watch a replay.
That is
All right, let's see. A couple more questions, Donna. Fred asked, how important is a website and an LLC to getting started?
If you are doing your deals in your IRA, then an LLC is not urgent. If you're going to be flipping notes outside the IRA, it'd be more important. I just really recommend an LLC for all business ventures. And what you do is when you set it up and it says, what is it going to be used for? When you register for the Secretary of State, you say for any legal purposes allowed in the state of whatever state you're registering in. And that way you can use it for anything you want. I just think it's a good idea to have one. And then as you do different things, you might set up additional ones. But to just get started, I wouldn't worry about that. In some states, they're quite expensive. Like I've heard it's $1,300 a year for a California LLC. I'm not going to do that. In Ohio, I want to say it's 135 or 150. It's not very much at all. And that's a one-time fee. So don't go out and spend a couple $1,000s to do an LLC. It's just, I wouldn't do that. A website, I think, is very important. And that's why we offer the templates as part of the Note Buyer's Master Guide. And Matthew can help you with that. We include the template. If you want his personal help, then that's between him and you, and he will charge you a reasonable fee for that. However, he's busy with me through the end of the year, so he can't take on any new websites in January. But you speak to that about you tell them about how they can use the template. Would you speak to that, please?
Yeah, sure. So the template page on the dashboard in the Master Guide System section, you'll see the website template page. The template itself is a file for a Divi theme on WordPress. And so you can either use that, and I've included instructions on how to implement it and how to find someone to help you with it even. Or you can just use another type of website builder like Squarespace or something and just, mimic the layout and the copy. But it's a good starter note buyer site. Got a lead form and just the basics that you need to get off the ground. And certainly you can improve upon it as you go, but it's enough to get you started. And like Donna said, I'm not available until probably a couple weeks into January, but put it on your calendar, shoot me a message if you'd like to collaborate on that. Let's see here. Oh, Jonas said it was the Javits Center, and he said you look great, Don.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, so let's see. Pearl had a question here regarding the skip tracing. So on the list that she bought, she said she's got 15% whose addresses are no good. Would this be a good opportunity to skip trace and find out where they're at, or should she just disregard, toss out the lead?
So this is what I used to do years ago, Pearl, and I'm not sure that it's still valid. So you'd have to check this. But you could send them your letter and put address correction request. It's forwarding and address correction requested. And I'm not sure because of the privacy laws if they still do that. What I would do is I'd go to the post office and I would ask them if they still do that. And what will happen is your letter will get forwarded to their new address. And that's if they've moved like within 6 months or a year. I don't know what exactly it is now. And they will send you a postcard with that new address. Now, when you get the postcard, you pay whatever the postcard rate is, but it's well worth it if you get the new address. So check into that to see if that's still a viable thing to do. If so, I would do that. Depending on where you bought the list from, some of them will replace the ones that are bad with new leads. They they will trade you basically if you'll tell them which leads were bad so they can clean up their list, they'll replace them. And some of them are very good about even giving you more just to compensate you for your expense of postage and everything. Um, so I would go back to who you bought them from and say, look, I'll be happy to give you the names and addresses that were bad if you'll, give me so much more, replace them.
Especially with 15% of them being returned.
That's
I'm
a
sure
large
that they
amount,
want
in
to
my opinion.
correct that. Yeah. And I think that Pearl had mentioned she brought several thousand. So yeah. Okay.
Is this Pearl that we just closed the note with? I bet it is. Pearl's an unusual and beautiful name.
Yes, it is that. It is Pearl. Yes.
Awesome. Pearl, I'm glad you're on tonight.
So there was just one last question here. Melanie asked, did you have to find a CPA that understood notes specifically?
Absolutely. And that would be Scott Ellsworth. And we interviewed him at the 2020 World Tour. So he is you'll get his interview, and he was on the panel discussion that we had. So you'll get all that information as part of the 2020 World Tour. I'm sorry, I was not planning on talking about the World Tour, or I would have had some slides up for you. I was simply just doing a Q&A tonight.
I dropped the link to Scott's firm in the chat.
Thank you for that.
All right, let's see. When you're holding the next academy, Donna?
You know what? I might have one in the spring. It just depends on what's going on with this pandemic. If I think that we can have a live one and do some kind of maybe it's a spring fling or something like that. Although, listen, many people that were at the academy, which was all virtual, many of them said that they preferred virtual to live. They said it was so much easier to learn having everything spread out on their own desk. They didn't have to pack up their stuff at night. They didn't have to fly anywhere. They could sleep in their own bed. If they have to go to the bathroom, they go across the hall and they're right back to their desk. So a lot of people really, really said they actually prefer virtual. The big complaint was that the lack of networking. But Matthew said they had fun. I excused myself so they wouldn't feel like embarrassed because I was sitting there listening. So I went ahead and left, and we had like a happy hour after hours thing, and people got to know each other online. But for the online networking is the reason that I would go back to having it in person. So depending on the pandemic, I might do something in spring. But I'll tell you, is it okay to tell them?
I was going to say, do you want to tease the expeditions?
So we got such a great response on the world tour. Like, people loved it. I mean, I've never had such accolades. And so what Matthew and I came up with is, instead of a world tour, we're going to do like 1 or 2 day excursions. And so what I'm going to do is over the Christmas holidays, I'm going to come up with maybe a dozen different topics that I think people would want to spend a day or two studying. And we will go to exotic places like we did on the world tour. And it will just be like a weekend thing. Maybe it'll be an all-day Saturday where I just teach on non-performing notes, or maybe an all-day Saturday on buying land contracts, or an all-day Saturday on practicing how to use a calculator, or different things like that. And it'll be at a very affordable price. And I'm even thinking of doing like some group packages, so you could pick 3, get a special deal if you sign up for all 3 of them, that kind of stuff. Just to give some more in-depth training. Like, why do you have to go away or plan on spending 4 days? That's what brought it all together, was this idea, was because 4 days is a long time to get everybody to sit in front of their computer. But you know what? Everybody did. I mean, we had no fallout whatsoever. And but that's when I thought, you know what, why don't we just divide it up and we'll just have periodic ones throughout the year. So watch for that, because we're going to come out with that the 1st of January. But just if you don't know what the World Tour was, we came up with exotic locations. And like I love this one. The one day we were in Alaska, and so I got my big fur coat out, my fur ear muffs or whatever you call it, and Matthew puts the background of the snow-capped mountains and everything, and I'm sitting there, sunglasses on. It's so cold. Like Matthew was here at my house as we were doing this, and I turned my air conditioning on. It was freezing in here, but I sat there for most of the day with that coat on. And then we did one where we were at Cancun, and the thing was that the people participating did the same thing, and they caught on real quick, and they would put like the background of the ocean and the waves going up and down, and people had their luau type shirts, or surfing shirts, I guess I should say. We just had fun with it, and it was a great learning experience, and just had a good time. We even gave out prizes for the best costume. So it was such a good time and such a great learning experience. We're going to expound on that for next year. So watch out.
It was fun. It was
really fun.
Yeah.
Really.
Costumes were great too, by the way.
Yeah. We gave out prizes and they loved that. So it was just a good time.
Cool. There's just one question left there. Jonas had asked, if not an LLC, what other kind of structures could he use to set up his business?
I would recommend an LLC and your self-directed IRA, and I think that's all you need. Now, that being said, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an attorney, and you could have a personal situation that maybe a corporation works better for you. I don't know, but I will tell you that most of my students have an LLC. And they use their IRA. If you're investing in your IRA, it's not as important to have an LLC. But if you're flipping notes outside your outside your IRA for everyday income, for your normal income, I would recommend an LLC.
Okay, awesome. I think that's, let's see, Donna, do you use a trust inside of your self-directed IRA?
I often use trusts. I will tell you that when you use a trust with a self-directed IRA, it's way cool because it's a lot easier to do your documents with a trust. And then when you're buying the note as an asset of the trust, you can do all of that outside the IRA. I hate to say it like this, but it's kind of like having a checkbook IRA, only it's referring to buying a note. But I'm very much against checkbook IRAs. And the reason is because of the audits. They trigger audits big time. But for the sake of understanding why I like using trust in the IRA, so I can be buying notes and hold them in the trust. And every time I buy a note or sell it to somebody else, I don't have to go back through my IRA, because the investment for the IRA was an investment in the trust. And then what the trust buys and sells is irrelevant. I hope you understood that.
Awesome. Okay. I'm just putting a link in the chat here to the 2020 Academy World Tour case studies training that Donna just put out. And the special on that, it goes away in 2 days on the 10th. So it's notebuyersacademy.com, but I'm putting a link in the chat right now. We'll include it in the email. Sorry, Donna, go ahead.
Should we extend that?
Sure.
I think we should extend it longer because some people need time.
Yeah. Okay. Why don't we run it through maybe the end of next week?
Let's run it at least through next Monday. Okay. And then we might extend further from there, but let's guarantee that they can do it through next Monday. And don't we have a payment plan on that one offered?
Yes, we do.
What's the payment plan?
So you can do 2 or 3 payments, and there's a financing charge for the 2 payments. It's $50. For the 3 payments, it's $100. I don't know off the top of my head. I don't have the numbers here, what the payments work out to, but I'm happy to set that up for you. So shoot me an email if you have a question about that.
Okay, that would be great. And then, so my point on that, the reason I'm asking is because if you don't want to put out money because of Christmas, you could just make a third of the payment, and that would guarantee you the lower price. Oh, I know, I remember now. It's all coming back to me. So our Thanksgiving Day special was that you get an extra 3 months of easy as 1, 2, 3 coaching. So that is big. So you'll get a total of 6 months of easy as 1, 2, 3 coaching. And again, I apologize that I wasn't planning on selling that. I don't have any slides up for it. But if you reach out to Matthew, he'll take good care of you, or just go use the link that he put in the chat.
Yeah, nobuyersaccademy.com has got a lot of info on there. And if you have any questions about it, of course, you're free to ask, and we're happy to answer anything. So I think that's it, Donna. Great job. I mean, that was a lot of questions.
I want to commend everybody who is on. These questions were absolutely the best questions I've ever had at a Q&A. Usually they want me to repeat everything that's already in the training. And these were, you can tell that you guys have really caught on, and you're really thinking through, really developing your business and everything. I've thoroughly enjoyed answering these questions tonight. So kudos to you guys, and thanks for being on. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.
Oh, there's one thing, Donna. Elaine asked if we might be willing to do a Q&A to start the new year. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Okay.
That's probably a very good idea. We might think of something special too. I just knew I had a lot of new people, and even older, by older, I don't mean age-wise, but students that have been with me for a while who are just getting into this because of the stimulus program. So I figured there'd be some good questions. That's why I just said we should do this. But yeah, we can definitely do something. Watch for the excursions that are coming out. I think that's going to be a really fun thing. And it's a way that you can get really in-depth training specifically on what you're wanting to learn at a really low price without, doing a 4-day academy kind of thing. I think you'll really like it.
Awesome. Well, Donna, great job, everyone. Thank you for joining us, spending a couple hours of your evening with us.
And thank you, Matthew, for going through the questions. That's a huge help for me.
Yes. Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope you guys have a Happy New Year as well.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I should have had Christmas decorations up. I didn't even think about it. Sorry about that.
I didn't think about it either.
Merry Christmas, everybody. Love you guys. Take care.
All right. See you guys.